Hello and welcome to Every Horror Movie on Netflix, the show where we watch and review and discuss every horror movie on Netflix. I'm Chris and I'm here with Patrick.
Hey.
And Steven.
Hi.
And we are about to talk about Grandmother's Farm, a movie that was picked for us by our beloved Wheel of Death. It is a 2013 film from the United Arab Emirates. But before we get into that, we like to catch up and talk about life, talk about horror in general, talk about things we've been doing that are horror related, be they in real life or in books or movies or TV shows or whatever. So what you guys been up to? How you doing?
I have a couple of things I'll go through quickly. Chris, I know you were very curious. You saw the trailer for Caveat during Joe Bob's Last Drive-In. I did watch it. Fascinating film, glorious cold open. This is a movie about a man with partial memory loss who is given a job to look after his landlord's niece, who appears to have some kind of psychological ailment in this really dilapidated house. But there's a catch, aka a caveat. And this gave me Babadook vibes a little bit. It's very expressionistic. I personally found it to be a little bit too convoluted to get fully invested in it, but I do plan on watching it again. I will say the mechanical rabbit that you see in the trailer that bangs the drum and has the angry eyes deserves an Oscar. It'll never get it. Yeah, a really interesting movie, some creepy moments, but I feel like there was too much plot getting in the way of the story, as Joe Bob would say. But very, very well made. The production design is incredible. Again, I think it might pay off a little bit more on a second viewing, and I can't wait to see what the director does next.
Those Shudder trailers can be deceiving. I saw the trailer for that on Shudder, and I was like, this looks like the best movie ever made. But pretty much every trailer I've seen on Shudder makes a movie look like the best movie ever made, and then you watch it and it's dreadful.
I also watched the quote-unquote lost George A. Romero film, The Amusement Park, from 1973 that popped up on Shudder. This has been in the works for a few years. I've been very curious about it. It's a movie that's under an hour long. It's not really a movie. It was commissioned the same year that George Romero directed The Crazies by a Lutheran organization, and they wanted him to make a PSA about the way that our society treats elders. And if you know that going in, it's a much more enjoyable experience because it is very on the nose. Romero can be like that even if he's not doing something paid for by a group like that. I found it to be pretty horrifying and pretty it touched a chord with me. A lot of my friends are in their 60s and 70s. I don't know why I tend to attract those sorts of folks of those generations, but it's about an actor, a real working actor who's been in some Romero films, playing a version of himself. He visits an amusement park, which is an analogy for life as an older person with younger people around. I mean, like when in the bumper car sequence, as you would expect in a film set in an amusement park, it turns into a fender bender, and the woman shouldn't have been driving. She needs an eye exam to determine whether or not she's culpable for crashing into the other car. It's a pretty nightmarish experience, and I can understand why the Lutheran organization that funded it rejected it immediately, and it wound up in a vault. I would say if you're a big Romero fan, it's well worth your time to seek out.
Certainly interesting from a historical perspective there.
Yeah, it fucked me up a little bit, to be honest, and I wasn't expecting that. And then I think the last thing was, Chris, you and I both watched different amounts of Joe Bob's Last Special on direct-to-VHS horror movies. I really enjoyed Sledgehammer, which I'd never heard of before. I have not gotten through the notorious film Things yet. I plan to, I just haven't had the time, and it was a little too much for one night for me. but I'm curious about what you thought about it.
This was, I mean, Joe Bob Briggs screened some deliberately bad straight to VHS movies. Well, the movies aren't deliberately bad. He deliberately screened bad movies, or movies that are infamous. And Sledgehammer was a trip. It was bad, but it was so bizarrely bad that I found a lot of entertainment in it. Everything was like broken in a weird way that kind of intrigued me. Things was even worse, and we might talk a little bit more about things and Sledgehammer as we review Grandmother's Farm.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I thought at least Sledgehammer was appropriate to mention. For this episode. There's
not a lot to say. I mean, it was bad, but I was grateful for having the experience of watching these oddities that I otherwise would never have watched, much like the reason I do this show.
Yeah, well, that's it for me. What about you guys?
Patrick, anything interesting going on with you?
Yeah, sorry guys, I've been out of the loop on the movie club this week. I guess I feel like I have missed some good shared experiences here. I haven't really watched a lot of horror. I saw The Quiet Place, as Chris and I like to call it. It's not A Quiet Place, it's The Quiet Place, Part 2. It was enjoyable, little slight, felt like a tee-up for the inevitable third part. But I've been reading a lot of horror. I read, at your recommendation, Stephen, A Head Full of Ghosts, which very, very much lived up to your high praise. Whether you like possession movies or possession stories, or like Steven, you dislike them as a genre.
Oh, I hate them.
Yeah,
generally, as a rule.
Right. I think this is an incredible one and an incredible way to kind of flip the genre on its head and really poke at a lot of the sort of social underpinnings of the genre. I really enjoyed that. And then at the recommendation of Paul Tremblay, he has kind of a list of suggested reading material in the back of the edition of the book that I read. I read his recommendation, The Diving Pool by Yoko Ogawa, which is a collection of 3 novellas. And, I mean, they certainly are horror. There are certainly horrific elements to the stories. They're not like, scary, but just deeply unsettling stories. And each one ends in a way that almost felt a little disappointing, or almost like a little bit of a letdown to me, where I almost wanted more. Yet these characters, these sort of desperate characters that the author creates, are just so fascinating and trapped in their own little private interpersonal hells in a way that has just really burrowed under my skin and caused me to continue thinking about each of the stories for quite a while after I finished reading it. So certainly enjoyed that.
It's like Raymond Carver, but spooky.
Yeah.
It sounds a little like, I'm sorry, did you say, are these, is the author Japanese?
Yes.
Okay. It sounds a little like, I had a period where I was into Japanese existentialism, as it's called, and Kobo Abe is a really interesting author. He wrote A Woman in the Dunes, which is a very similar thing, where it's not overtly horror, but you do find yourself, like, trapped in the plight with the character while also criticizing them at the same point.
Yeah.
It's something that I've never really seen in Western literature before.
Yeah, and there's a lot...
I have to check this out.
Yeah, and there's some really interesting just sort of like horror of the senses. In some ways, it reminded me in some ways of some of Junji Ito's work, because of course a lot of Junji Ito's work is very overly visceral and graphic, but he can also just tap into the way that your senses can deceive you and sort of horrify you. One of the stories in The Diving Pool, one of the characters gets very fixated on scents and is just overwhelmed and kind of disgusted by the scents that she's taking in, and that was, again, just unsettling in a not over the top, but just very low-key kind of way. So, yeah, definitely enjoyed The Diving Pool. And also finally read Carmilla by Joseph Sheridan Le Fanu, the famous lesbian vampire novel, which certainly lived up to its reputation. That was a delight. Certainly progressive for its time as far as depiction of a lesbian relationship, but, we've come a long way since then, baby. So that's about it for me this week.
I've still been I said before on this show that I was really looking forward to Resident Evil 8 or Resident Evil Village, and I got it like first day it was available, and I've just been busy and I haven't been given it a whole lot of time. I think I'm about halfway through it or a little bit more. And it's been great. It started off a little slow, and then there were some really amazing sequences. It's funny how much this game and several other horror games that are on the market right now owe so much to PT, the little playable trailer that Hideo Kojima made for the Silent Hill game that was never made. It's funny how they canned that game, and now Konami, the developer of that game, has to kind of sit back and watch other games that are hugely successful just riffing on it. So that's going on in Resident Evil Village a little bit. I've been enjoying it. Too soon to really talk about more. If I finish it and I love it as much as I love the first one, you can expect me to talk about it again. But just a little update on that. Otherwise, I haven't really been doing anything horror related. So you guys ready to get into Grandmother's Farm or what?
Yeah, let's go to the convenience store and pick up snacks for like a half hour.
Yep. Great way to set this up.
This film, I mean, one of our, Patrick and I's favorite recent horror films is Unsane by Steven Soderbergh, famously entirely. Too. Oh, I didn't know you saw it.
Oh,
great.
Yeah, I love it.
I think didn't Chris and I both name that like our favorite movie of whatever year it came out, or our favorite horror movie, I guess.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. It would have been truly Unsane if we called it the best film of the year. Period.
It might have been my favorite film of the year. I don't know. But, that movie was famously shot exclusively on an iPhone. And for a long time, I thought this movie was going to be shot exclusively on a dash cam.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, my God. We don't even see our quintet of characters until like 15 minutes into this fucking movie. We're just riding in this car around the city, going to the gas station. Oh, my God. How to even set this up.
Okay, yeah, 15 minutes is exaggerating, but also the way that this opens is so strange, because you do have just what seems to be kind of, like Chris said, dash cam video of Abu Dhabi, I assume, right? I don't know the scenery of Abu Dhabi very well, but I assume that's what it is. Just from the dashboard of a car over the credits. And then the credits end, and it continues with dash cam video for, I mean, it's not a long time, but it's still long enough with characters talking in the background that you're like, wait, is this just how this is going to be? And then they change it up. It's just one of many sort of, I don't want to say off-putting, I just want to say it like kind of just put me off balance. There are a lot of creative choices in this that just sort of put me off balance.
Well, they change it up and commit further cinema sins as the movie goes on. Like, I feel like we every like 10 minutes we get stuck in a mode of like, this could be an artistic choice. It's probably just a mistake though. And we have to sit with that for a while until something happens.
Yeah.
Rinse and repeat.
Yeah, like let's not bury the lead here. This is a movie that is just inscrutable at every level from start to finish. And so, look, when we go into these movies, especially these foreign films, obviously there's a barrier here where us three ugly Americans are not equipped to fully interpret a film from the United Arab Emirates. Some stuff maybe have more meaning culturally if we live in the United Arab Emirates that we'd be receiving. There may be themes that are going completely over our head. There may be symbolism that's going over our head. There may be film conventions that are going over our head. That said, that can only account for some of the confusion going on in this movie. And this movie is just bizarre and, dare I say, incompetent at every level.
Dare away, I'm with you. I mean,
I want to be more kind about. I mean, I'm not even saying that to diss it. Really, it's just, and we'll get into some of the things that were just really dysfunctional in this movie.
Well,
but,
let me offer, I guess, an early. I don't know if I want to say it's a defense, but I just think it's very useful context on this movie. So the UAE's film industry is extremely new and essentially non-existent. Like, if you look up a list of Emirati films, there's, you could count them pretty quick. Like, there are not a lot of films that have been made there by Emirati filmmakers. Increasingly, people like Tom Cruise are going there and shooting their own movies that are produced in America, but there are not a lot of Emirati films. And this movie was made by a guy who was the director was a mechanical engineer. He made it for, I converted this into US dollars.
I'm so glad you did. I was too lazy.
he made it for $81,000.
Okay.
And it had what Gulf News, I don't know what Gulf News is, but it's a media outlet, it appears to be in the UAE. It had what this publication describes as an unheard of 5-week run across the UAE. They say that's unheard of for an out-and-out commercial Emirati film. So, you know, it's interesting within that context that there is this weird space where there are not a lot of films being made there right now, and this guy kind of just came out of nowhere, clearly made something for cheap with his friends, and had a pretty solid success with it in his home country.
So much
that's
so that a sequel followed not long afterward.
Yeah,
with a bigger
exactly.
budget.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
I mean, to me, that's like I appreciate that context, but at the same time, I don't know what kind of exposure films from other countries have in that region. But, like, I think about this in the context of, like, okay, well, what about, like, Michigan independent cinema? Like a film like Evil Dead, which was made for a lot more money. I'm looking at $375,000. But, like, it is possible to make a movie with very few resources.
Wow, the original Evil Dead was made. That's not even adjusting for inflation. Like that was the budget in 1980, whatever.
This is what Wikipedia tells me. I mean, it was what we would consider shoestring in the States, which is probably equivalent to in the UAE. But I tried to give this movie some points for being a quote unquote regional film, and even still, it is just utterly incompetent and lacking imagination on every level.
Well, I really appreciate that context, that this is, you know, a film coming from a very, you know, nascent film industry.
Yeah.
Because and actually it the way I felt watching this film, this movie might be revolutionary, actually.
Yes, bring on the hot take.
All right, because there were sequences and there were shots in this film. So, like, I was thinking about how the early filmmakers in you know, convention, I guess what we'd call conventional filmmaking, the film industry we know today, the early filmmakers, you know, someone had to be the first person to, like, realize that you didn't have to shoot the whole scene in one shot. You could cut away. You could do a close-up, and then you could go back to the master shot, right? But, like, when you've seen that for the first time in, like, 1910 or whatever, you don't really have the grammar to make sense of that. I'm thinking of, like the Kuleshov effect, one of my favorite effects now, which actually is, I guess, misnamed because his, like, female editor invented it and not actually Kuleshov. But the idea that, you know, you can have a guy, I watched a YouTube video on it, that was their argument. I don't know if it's true, but
you're on solid ground.
The Kuleshov effect is where, you know, you have a guy and he's, you know, looking, and then you insert, you know, a meal or a dead baby or a cat, and then you cut back to the guy's face, and, you know, that second shot in the middle informs the way you interpret the guy's reaction on the face. Anyway, but, like, that whole thing was, when that was new, it's like people didn't know how to process that either. And so watching some of these decisions and the editing and the shots and the going back and forth between the action, I'm like, this is just something my brain cannot process. And maybe it's just, you know, someone who's never seen a movie before making a movie with a new type of grammar that will be the only way movies are made in 100 years.
But we live in an era where, like, you can look up YouTube videos about how to make movies on, like, every level. Like, any specific skill that you want to learn, you can learn about it pretty easily.
Yeah, but Stephen, they knew, they didn't care. They chose to create a new language.
Yeah, I'm not going to buy that for 1 second. This is a high school student film in my mind.
No,
which is fair. I remember learning how to make movies by, like, I heard about some filmmaker talking about this in a podcast recently, and it, like, resurrected a lot of memories for me. Like, I remember actively learning, like, doing movies, doing what we call in-camera editing, where you shoot every shot in sequence, and then eventually learning, like, oh, you can actually assemble this footage later and edit it together. It doesn't have to be completely linear. This feels like somebody's first stab at picking up a camera and shooting a movie, which is, frankly,
it's not, actually. The director,
Oh, no.
the director has been making short films for the last 13 years.
Well, that's sad. That's very sad. That's
I
very
don't
sad.
believe it.
A lot of lessons
He's
left
padding
unlearned.
his resume to get investment. He's padding his resume to get investors for Grandmother's Farm.
I mean,
I don't believe it.
Should we
What?
back out and at least describe the plot of this movie for a moment?
well, let me add one more thing, because it's sort of still on this same note instead of me going back to this well multiple times. One final note, I guess, in defense of this movie, which, I mean, I will reveal and probably already have tipped my hat. I mean, I did not like this movie. It is incoherent, but I still admire it. I think that's sort of the distinction I would make. I didn't like it, but I admire it. And one of the reasons I admire it is, again, going back to this article I was reading about it, Ahmad Zain is the director's name. And he says, "These are my people. I know what kind of movie they want. They want to enjoy something from the UAE, something in our language, showing our clothes and all the things related to us." And I think that's cool, I mean, there's apparently a big market for both Hollywood and Bollywood movies there. But, I mean, it's such an interesting thing to think about, having, I mean, the UAE is a very well-developed country, and they, like I said, have an appetite for cinema from a lot of other places. But it must be so weird to have so few movies made in your own country, representing your own culture. And how cool to have a movie come out that actually does that, even if it is as much of a mess as this one.
Well, this would be like if we ever do the Dog Lady 1944, whatever it is, we'll have the same effect on Monroe.
Well, maybe. I mean, I wouldn't go that far. I mean, pretty much you or I and the people around us, can find a movie that kind of reflects our culture.
True.
And you know what? The things I liked most about this movie. Oh God. Yeah, maybe. I'm changing my tune on that a little bit. The things I liked most about this movie were the scenes that were kind of slice of life. I really, as much as it served no purpose really to the plot, I did like the extended sequence at the convenience store at the beginning, because it was I've never been in a convenience store in the United Arab Emirates, and it seemed very naturalistic. And I was like, this is interesting.
I agree, actually. I mean, I simultaneously was like, wow, this is going on for a long time and accomplishing very little, but also was like, this is interesting, just as a cultural experience. Because Abu Dhabi is a place I've always wanted to go, and I'm like, oh, hey, I get to just hang out in one of the most mundane places in this place.
We could hang out with them in a more interesting and intimate way, though. It's all wide shots. You can barely hear anybody talking.
No, I know it's not well done. I'm just picking out the things that I actually did enjoy in that moment, which was, hey, I'm in a convenience store in Abu Dhabi just hanging out. This is interesting.
Oh, they have teddy bears in convenience stores. How fascinating.
Yeah. No, I mean, it is.
I'm going to Abu Dhabi as soon as I'm good enough to compete in the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu World Tournament, which is often in Abu Dhabi.
Well, let me sum up what we're saying here, which I think we can all agree. This movie was based on interviews that I've read with the director, which are few and far between, unfortunately. There's not a lot of reading material out there, at least in English, about this film. This movie was, for all intents and purposes, not made for a Western audience. This movie was made for the UAE. This was made, to kind of speak to sort of the values and experiences of people who live there. It's not for us. And I find it fascinating that it wound up on Netflix, especially given the poor quality of the filmmaking. And I am genuinely curious to see more films made from there. I looked at a comprehensive list of every Emirati film that has ever been made, and there are not many. There may be 30. The only one I recognized was a Toby Hooper movie that I oddly have not seen. He did shoot a film entirely in the United Arab Emirates called Jinn. I heard it's not great. There's apparently a really good director's cut that's impossible to find. You got to know the right people. But I want to actively look up these movies and find out what's going on there. What's the scene? This is probably very lower tier for what's happening in the world of film there.
Maybe every scene in this movie is just a Scary Movie-esque riff on a famous scene from Emirati cinema.
Maybe.
Yeah, that's...
We should probably explain what the fuck the movie's about. other than
So
going to a convenience store.
It's very simple. We have some friends. I think there's 5 of them. I only say that because Steven mentioned a quintet.
I think there are
Is it
5.
friends. 5 friends, and they're getting away for a little like weekend or something, R&R, to go to one of
we got the ladies' man, we got the religious guy, we got the intellectual writer.
The writer who loves to read aloud. He cannot read without his mouth open and moving.
Yeah. We got the person who I can only describe as the fat guy because that's his entire like personality trait.
Yep.
And who am I missing?
The main guy.
Yes.
The guy who the
grandson.
He hates trouble, but he might be the cause of it. I think because we get these title cards that explain the archetypes, which I
loved that.
Ridiculous.
I love that. It really makes it easier to watch the movie when you have a title card that explains the character's personality.
Well, each of them were like sort of a little funny and almost like poetic in a weird way. I loved that. At that point, I was like, oh, we might be in for something cool.
There was a hilarious bad translation issue here, which this is not a fault of the film, but the ladies' man, who is arguably one of the ugliest people in this group, I'm just going to throw it out there. Like, I found it shocking that they cast this guy as the ladies' man. But
well, that was the point.
But his description is love not at first sight. And I don't know what that means.
It means that he's an ugly guy. Like, they deliberately cast, I wouldn't even call him ugly, but, you know, he's a little awkward looking and he has acne and stuff.
Yeah,
but
I think we need not appearance shame. You wouldn't say that if it was a female character.
No, I might.
I don't know. He might. He might. Anyway, but no, that was the irony of it, because he's the ladies' man, but he's also ugly. And
I want to say face. I want to say face very briefly. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Chris.
Sure.
I want to say he's unlikely to be a ladies' man based on his physical appearance.
That's the point.
Right, that's the point. But he's also like weirdly good at it, which I found to be.
That's the point.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think
let's dispel this.
Let's dispel the fiction.
Let's dispel this fiction that Grandmother's Farm doesn't know what it's doing. It knows exactly what it's doing.
That Syed doesn't know what he's doing. I think that was his name. I started to get all their names mixed up. But yeah, he's that guy who lays on the charm, you know. And boy, does the actor sell it. This actor,
he's great.
Boy, he can. Oh, I was joking, but.
I thought he was fantastic. For what an awkward role he's meant to fill.
I have never seen someone text so with such vigor. He just is texting in the car and you can tell he's not actually texting. He's just like tapping the screen in different places, and it has almost a dancer-like rhythm to it. You know, actually, this sort of bolsters Chris's theory of a whole new grammar, because he does not look like he's actually texting. It's a whole new texting. He's creating the new texting.
And we all have that friend who is like, you know, don't worry, I'm gonna talk to these girls. I'm gonna talk to these, and then he spends the whole party. He's like texting. He's like, no, they're coming, and then they never show up. Very relatable.
I have to interject here because around that point in the movie where I realized that that's his role. He meets these 3 honeys at the convenience store, and he's trying to get them to come to Grandmother's Farm. I was like, okay, they're going to have a rager at Grandmother's Farm. No.
Yeah.
No.
Oh, no.
When they get to Grandmother's Farm, it is the most sober, depressing vacation experience I can possibly imagine. They don't even start roasting the lamb until 10 o'clock at night, and that's got to take a few hours, I would think. But that's their entertainment.
Okay, but is that cultural ignorance on our part? I mean, I don't know. Would these people even be? You know, I don't know. We're probably expecting them to be doing shots and shit. Is that something they'd even be doing?
No. They would not be doing shots or anything. But it did make it seem like I don't even know how to describe it. I'm just going to stop there.
we already put the disclaimer out there that
we don't know.
We are coming at this through a naive cultural lens.
Let's dispel with this fiction that we know what we're doing.
Yeah, we don't know what we're doing. But yeah, so you got these 5 guys, and one of them has a grandmother who ostensibly has a farm. It's more of a just generic Airbnb.
It's a whole huge compound.
I clocked it. There's no indication of agriculture until halfway through this movie.
When they arrive, you do hear some chickens in the background. There's some ADR chickens.
Okay, we got some chickens dubbed in.
Some kind of fowl, I don't know.
So they stop at a convenience store, for snacks and stuff. We spend an excruciating long period of time just watching like a wide shot of them walking around the convenience store. And
even just pulling out of the convenience store. Remember that one shot where it lingers on the car just sitting there. The car shifts into reverse, sits there. Slowly backs out. We watched this car back out for that may have been 15 minutes.
It was like almost a minute, and like there's like action movie music going on. It's also like just awkwardly framed too. Like
there's that little filmmaking adage that you should come into a scene late and leave early.
Yeah.
I think he did watch a YouTube video about this, but he got it mixed up. And we come into the scene early and we leave late. Every scene. But our ladies man meets three ladies at the store, and he's texting them, he gets their number or whatever, and he's like, I'm going to get these girls to come out to grandmother's farm. They drive through the desert to grandma. They do some off-roading, they do some dune crawling in the vehicle.
Oh, they ride over some fucking bones with flesh on them.
Which
they seemingly
the dune crawling is also some of the worst framed shots in the movie. Like the car is at least 50% of the time either out of frame or like cropped partly out of frame. That was blowing my mind too.
I'm gonna tell you why that is in a little bit.
Okay.
I know why this movie looks like it does.
Interesting.
Wow.
But yeah,
there's suspense now. I'm feeling more suspense than I did any time in this movie.
Same.
They dune crawl over some ominous looking bones that looked like they were like kind of left behind by the production of Dabe.
It's like a cow skeleton.
Yeah.
It's like multiple skeletons, and there's like bits of flesh lingering, like they find some blood on the car when they get to the grandmother's farm. I thought that was kind of cool. I'm like, inciting incident, 25 minutes into the movie, great.
Honestly, Steven, this really reminded me of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yes, Chris, I'm glad you said that, and I knew you would.
You knew I would say that, yeah. Like the whole sort of, opening up where they're going on a trip in the car, and they, they stop and they get some snacks, and you got like the fat guy kind of sitting in the back of the van.
It's like they saw TCM and not TCSM.
Yes. Right. That's a deep cut joke there. Steven's referring to the remake, which is called the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, one word, as opposed to the original, which is Chainsaw Massacre, 2 words or 3 words.
Well, yeah, except Texas Saw Massacre gives you all kinds of unsettling shit for the first 25-30 minutes, as opposed to this where it takes forever to like run over a cow or camel or whatever skeleton in the desert.
Right. The skeletons in this are the armadillo from TCSM, but it comes much later than you would expect.
The reason I'm bringing it up now is because the bones leave that smear of blood on the van, just like in Chainsaw Massacre.
Not lost that.
Maybe, so I don't know. Anyway, so they eventually make it to grandmother's farm, and then they just hang out, and that's your movie. I don't know what else to say.
It's like an Abu Dhabi Apatow movie.
Yes, I wrote down Apatow in my notes. Yeah, actually.
I mean, I think it's supposed to be funny at times, for sure.
I'm sure it's funny if you're in this friend group, or you know these people, or like. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, the other thing is all these friends seemingly hate each other. There's not one moment of friendship in this movie. They all just fucking bicker and hate each other and accuse each other of stuff and whatever. Sometimes you go on a trip with your friends and that's what it's like.
Yeah, it's eerily familiar to me. I will say no more. Yeah, but they're all kind of reductive stereotypes. Some are more charming than others. I thought the best performance was the grandson, the bitchy grandson who doesn't like trouble but might be the cause of it. I thought he was like pretty compelling, trying to rally everybody, keep things together. He's no nonsense. He doesn't believe in the supernatural.
He's constantly pissed at all his friends.
Yeah, that's me. I think that's why I identified with him.
I don't know. He's also the character who it's like, he seemed like a character out of The Bar, to reference the last movie we watched, where it's like, he's just mad at everybody. And it's like, oh, wow, our whole ass lamb roast just disappeared. I'm sure one of my friends ate the whole roast. I'm going to kick his ass. Everyone's like, dude, it's physically impossible for someone to eat this whole roast in like 5 minutes that we were away from it. He's like, no, I'm going to go kick his ass.
But there were like 10 fat shaming jokes leading up to that about how that particular person in this group could do something like that too, though. So I empathize with him up to a point.
I don't know. I like to, our most serious character is the religious character.
Yeah.
And I thought maybe this, speaks to maybe the theme that this movie was going for, where he's kind of the butt of the joke at the beginning of the movie. Everyone's like, hey, we're partying, we're talking to girls. Oh, hope that doesn't bother you, Mr. Religious Man. But then, things get spooky, and the religious man is the only one kind of keeping shit together. He's, smoking the room. He's in the right.
Well, and the intellectual, the writer, is also in that role as well, because he's constantly reading off his Kindle the entire time the story that...
It's an iPad.
I was making a joke.
Oh, okay.
Also,
it's only a funny joke if you know it's an iPad.
Yeah, also who cares?
And also, who cares? But he's reading this story the whole time that I guess is kind of relevant to the plot.
It's supposed to be, at least. I mean, it definitely is at the end.
Yeah.
But I got the sense the entire time watching this, like, oh, of course, he's reading it aloud and annoying his friends, because apparently he can't read with his fucking mouth closed. And I got the sense, like, oh, this is supposed to be thematically irrelevant, and it doesn't really pay off for quite a while, if it really does at all.
Yeah.
Very odd choice.
Yeah, and I mean, that's really an area where there's probably a cultural significance that we're not grasping.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's like a retelling of like a common, I don't know if this is a spoiler, but a common djinn sort of fable. I have no idea. I would love to know if there's more to that, but it did feel very on the nose to me the entire time.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I think it's certainly on the nose. I would suspect, with no evidence, that it's a well-known fable or something that is kind of being reenacted through the events of the movie.
Yeah.
And he's there kind of as a Greek chorus character to say, this is what's happening, everybody.
Yeah, because, I mean, long story short, we end up getting into some trouble with a djinn, and I do say some trouble, and, like, some in the very, like, slightest interpretation of the word some, because the trouble does not start to happen until quite late in the movie, and it really is not a whole lot of trouble at all in the end.
No. I mean, we've watched 115 horror movies on Netflix. I have seen some shit. I would take the horrors of Grandmother's Farm over the horrors in any other movie we have seen.
Yeah, I think so.
The cable went out while I was watching soccer. Fuck.
My friend is like dazed standing next to the refrigerator when I go for a bottle of water. Like, it's so mundane.
Yeah, incredibly mundane. Yeah. And so, I mean, there's various like kind of subplots. I mean, the most significant subplot is these women who like our ladies' man guy is like texting, and then he like tries to meet them, but there's like some weird, it seems like maybe gaps in time and space where they like meet up, but then they're not there, and then they come back and only one of them's there,
and they're following his car, but they don't see him. Like,
well,
I didn't really understand what was going on there.
Well, he seems to be possessed in some way for at least a portion of the movie. Like, he ain't right for a while, and is like, he goes to meet up with the girls, but then is acting strange. And I'm glad that was as inexplicable to y'all as it was to me, because I was
so
like,
vague.
am I misunderstanding something here? It was quite unclear what was happening with all that to me.
Yeah, I mean, there's a long shot where we see him standing in the kitchen, and his friends walking around behind him, and then his friends walking out of the kitchen. He's like, "Oh, whoa, you scared me," as if he hadn't been in the kitchen the whole time. So maybe a little bit of artistry there, maybe a little bit of foreshadowing there, but it is inexplicable.
No, he's acting like not right for a while, but it's done in such a ham-fisted, haphazard way that I didn't really know how I was supposed to feel about it. I was like, okay, something's going on with him. He's going to go pick up that girl, but, like, if he's possessed, I don't know by what.
Yeah.
It's very weird.
It's the djinn, man. It's the djinn.
I mean, it turns out, spoilers,
Dude, interestingly, as I was looking at some folks' thoughts on this movie online, a consistent point of reference was a franchise that we have actually checked in on through this podcast before, Dabe, which...
Oh, really?
Yeah, which I would watch.
Dabe, this is not.
Yeah, I mean, Dabe was a trip. I forget what I rated it exactly, but I enjoyed Dabe much more than this. Let's put it that way.
We saw Dabe for The Possession, right?
I forget what number it was, but it was Dabe the Possession. Yeah.
4 or 5, and yeah, the review that I sent to you earlier that I think you also saw, and apparently you saw more elsewhere, but they referred to like the first film in the franchise, which. I don't know if I'm more or less curious to see it now in reference to this movie, but yeah. I'm slightly intrigued.
Maybe Dabe 1 is a fucking banger.
Might be. I mean, it spawned at least 4 sequels.
Okay, I feel like I do this almost every episode and only like 50% of the time follow through, but I'm setting myself an assignment to watch Dabe 1 before next episode, and I will report back.
Let's hang out and watch Dabe.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, I actually did think of Dabe watching this because it's one of the other few Middle Eastern films that we've watched. It's a Turkish film, and it involves jinn, much like this movie. Yeah. And I was thinking, like, no wonder we're getting like dozens of outrageous comments a day on our Dabe clip on Facebook, because if you are in the Middle East and you're watching movies like Grandmother's Farm and then you watch Dabe. You're gonna shit your pants. like it's not gonna be funny. It's not gonna be fun. You're gonna get on Facebook and you're gonna say this should be illegal and you should be in jail. That's how much I'm terrified right now. Because Dabe is not fucking around compared to Grandmother's Farm.
I was reading today that like the jinn sort of mythology spans so many different cultures and countries, and there are not only like evil jinns but good jinns apparently. Mm-hmm. Like it's so complicated.
Tanqueray. Beefeater,
Robin Williams,
Seagrams.
I don't know about Seagrams.
That's a bad jinn.
Oh man, me saying Robin Williams just got lost just now.
I mean, I got it.
It wasn't as funny as my joke.
Wow.
Bottom line, I'm just getting it now.
Maybe that means it was better.
Could be.
Probably not. All right. We should review it.
Yeah, we absolutely should.
Let me explain the framing issue.
Oh, please. That was intriguing.
This, because all right, there are so many shots where something's out of frame, or especially like the bottom of the frame. Like we see our priest, our holy man character, like doing an art and craft on the kitchen counter, but the kitchen counter is completely out of frame. He's just like putting his hands below the frame and doing something. We can't see it. What's going on here? I know as a videographer who has made a movie or two, they shot this movie in 16:9, and then they put a letterbox matte on top of it because they thought it made it look more cinematic. But they did not shoot it for that, and they did not adjust the framing once they did that.
So it's not a pan and scan sitch as I thought it might be.
It's not a scan sitch, which maybe that's like they shot and handed it off to some other editor, and then it just went straight from editing out there, and the editor was just phoning it in and was like, I'm just gonna throw this on top of it.
Well, let's review it. Chris, you let off the episode. Why don't you go first? View it, cue it, or screw it.
I'm going to give it a screw it. I mean, I have no malice towards anybody. God bless them all. But this was excruciating for me to watch. I felt like my mind was dissolving the more I watched it, because it's just every scene, every shot, every line of dialogue feels like a non sequitur. It doesn't follow the rules of filmmaking you're used to. On top of that, I don't have a problem with subtitles, but it does add a layer of like how much you have to pay attention to a movie and another thing to do while you're watching a movie, and in a movie that's this inept on every other level of its construction, adding subtitles is also just another layer of complexity. It just doesn't really do anything right. There was, I think, maybe one thing that because I always try to find one thing that I'm like, that was cool, or I like that. I think there was maybe one plot device that I thought was kind of interesting, that I thought, oh, that could have been something, or that's an interesting idea. But other than that, do not watch. Screw it. Patrick.
I was trying real hard to come up with a Q-it for this movie, but because of the argument Chris made about this new cinematic grammar, I think I got to give it a view it. No, I'm just kidding. It's a fucking screw it.
Oh.
It's a screw it.
Thank God.
Thank God.
Thank
I could not. I was not ready to be trolled that badly.
I love that I had you both for a second, even though I didn't even play it out for a long pause. But yeah, I mean, this was a rough watch. I kind of stopped it. It should have been a quick one because it's an hour and 10 minutes, but I was stopping it, starting it, and rewinding to try and catch things that I thought I had missed, but it turned out I hadn't. It's rough. But again, as I said earlier, I guess I will say all that with the caveat that, I do admire that there's this dude who's just an engineer in the UAE who's been making movies for 13 years and clearly made something on the cheap with his friends and had a great success with it. That's amazing. That's awesome. That's worth celebrating. But screw it. Steven.
Yeah, I'm with you. I admire the breakout success of this filmmaker and the cast and being able to make a sequel, in a part of the world where there's just not really a solid film industry. But this movie is a fucking cursed toilet. It is just, it is so oppressively ugly and incomprehensible.
You just open it up and you just keep pulling out cow guts and skulls and all kinds of shit.
That said, I wish it were like that, but it's not. There's barely any horror in this movie. That's something we haven't talked about. It takes until... I don't even think there are acts in this movie, which is another problem I have with it. I'm all for subverting the 3-act structure, but you have to do it intentionally. You have to know the rules to break the rules. This is just fucking people hanging out and weird shit happens, but you mostly don't see it. You hear people talk about it, which is far less interesting than actually seeing it. It's just completely inept on every level. Yeah, there might be some cultural context I'm missing, but even if it's there, it's not going to turn this fucking thing into a masterpiece for me. It's awful. No. It's absolutely awful. No. It feels like I said before, I was thinking it felt like a student film while I was watching it, and I was thinking more like a undergraduate film. No, this is a middle school student film. It is just you've seen one movie before and you've never learned anything about filmmaking, and you're trying to make a feature film that is only an hour and 10 minutes. How can a movie that's an hour and 10 minutes feel like it's 5 hours long? I have so much contempt for this thing.
Wow, contempt.
Contempt for this film. Not for the filmmakers. Good for them. I'm glad they're successful. I hope they learn some lessons along the way.
Again, and in the spoiler room, he'll tell us what he really thinks.
The possible stuff we're missing with, cultural references, themes, etc. That would maybe elevate them. I'm looking for the reason why this movie exists and what it's trying to do. It would elevate me to a point where I'm okay, I understand what they were trying to do, and it was terrible. They failed horribly. There's not. I agree that nothing that we're missing would save this movie by any stretch of the imagination.
All right, Chris, you want to lead us down to the spoiler room?
Yeah, but first, I want to give the regular spiel about what we ask of our listeners. We don't ask for much, but we do ask that follow us on social media if you want to hang out with us, between episodes, or let us know what you thought. Hey, maybe you're from the United Arab Emirates and you know exactly what this movie was trying to do and you want to tell us about it.
Blow us the fuck out, please. I welcome
blow us away, yeah. We love that. We love that. That's our favorite, probably our favorite type of comment to receive.
I would say so too, yeah.
Dude, yeah, I was delighted the one time when someone weighed in on 1920 London, who, if I remember correctly, was from India and loved the movie and could offer perspective on why they loved it within the perspective of their culture.
They did not love the movie.
To hear.
They told us why it was terrible.
I think we're thinking of different people.
Okay, all right.
But yeah, I want to hear the Emirati fans' argument for this movie, because obviously I've read the director and the producer's argument for the movie, but I want to hear from someone from the UAE who watched this and loved it, and I want to hear why.
At the end of the day, it's just not a movie for critics. They made it for the fans.
Well, I mean, honestly, you're joking, but like, yes.
No, yeah, that's how I felt too.
Absolutely. Like, I mean, I think you said it, I forget which of you said, I think it was Chris early in this, but this movie was not made for us.
Yeah.
Like, it's ludicrous in a way that we're even reviewing it, because it's not for us.
Well, the Wheel of Death chose it. I didn't.
Right, yeah, exactly. This is the row we hoe in this Amon world.
It's our gift. It's our curse. It's why I'm going to retire. That is a Millennium reference. Anyway,
got to get one into every episode.
So yeah, please, leave a comment if you want to hang out with us. Follow us on social media. Go to your podcast provider of choice. Rate and review us if you haven't already. We appreciate the feedback, and it helps us get our podcast in front of more ears. And you can always go to our website, everyhorrormovieonnetflix.com, and excuse the state of disrepair it's in, but if you're there, you might be able to find our merch store where we can sell we can sell you a t-shirt or a coffee mug with a little piece of Every Horror Movie on Netflix art on it. You can check out our master list of all the movies we've reviewed and the ratings we've given it, figure out what you want to watch next, and that's about it. So I guess we're ready to go to the spoiler room. So let's the
spoiler farm.
Spoiler farm, where they're gonna go get the chickens out of the studio.
About to roast a lamb.
We're gonna roast a lamb. That's what I was just about to say. Come on down to the spoiler farm with us. We're gonna have some lamb down there. It'll be great.
And we'll spoil everything. So we'll be back in a bit. All right, welcome back. We are here on Grandmother's Farm in the spoiler room, getting ready to roast a lamb and spoil everything. I don't know what there's to spoil, fellas.
Dude, yeah, I don't understand what happened in the end. Like, the one girl gets in the ladies' man's car, and I think she's the djinn or is possessed by the djinn. And again, like, just in the most low-key terms I can use, hell breaks loose? Question mark?
Happens, I mean, weird. I guess I don't understand, like, this version of what a djinn is, because weird shit happens without her even being there. Is it that, like, she's already cast a spell over the ladies' man and he's at Grandmother's farm, and because he's there, weird things start happening because he's infected with her djinn energy? I'm lost.
Or maybe it kind of passes between people, because I feel like the inciting incident, like the reason this all happens is because they run over the bones in the desert, and then the ladies' man starts to act weird. He picks up the one girl, and then she kind of seems to be the villain or whatever from there. So maybe it's like kind of passed between them. I don't know. It's very hard to decipher. And again, probably because this is not made for us. This probably makes at least somewhat more sense if you have any cultural grasp on this.
It's probably still not very exciting, though, even if you do have the cultural grasp you're speaking of.
Delete this episode. Delete our account.
I'll give you my interpretation, again, coming from a place of total ignorance. But based on, some of the banter we get at the beginning with the religious guy, the way I interpreted the movie is that we have a group of 5 friends who are transgressing the teachings of Islam, and they are talking with women and things like that, and the women happen to be, I think they're all jinn, possibly. At least one of them's a jinn. But I'm biased because Steven texted me a spoiler and was like, I guess the moral is all women are jinn. And so when I watched this,
I was kind of pretending
like,
to be you, Chris, when I said that.
All these women are jinn.
See, I don't know if I agree with that, because the other two are freaked the fuck out in that scene where the one woman, Nora, gets into his car.
Yeah.
I don't think they're all jinn.
All right, well, at least one of them is jinn. Probably.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But I think just, these guys kind of just looking to gallivant and talk to girls, and they encounter a jinn, and it extends an invitation to dark forces that can only, as our guy who reads the book all the time says, like, only the holy man is going to protect them and everything like that. So I think that's kind of what's going on here. Who knows? And yeah, the thrills are mild at best. My favorite thrill
let's hear it.
was there's a character who's sleeping, and he awakes and there's a black cat in his room.
Oh my god, the sound that cat makes.
That was hilarious. A human
yeah.
was definitely making that sound.
The cat makes the most insane. The cat goes. Meow.
Chris, that sounds more like an actual cat than the cat in this movie.
Yeah.
So it's also like weirdly
does.
the visual is weirdly like blurred and bifurcated in a psychedelic sort of way that I didn't fully comprehend.
And the guy, our actor sees this cat, which is by all means, it's just a cat. It's just a black cat, and he reacts with such terror. He looks like the woman on the cover art of the Babadook looking at this cat, but it's just a cat. I thought that was hilarious and kind of par for the course in terms of the level of spooks this gives you and how crazy people react to them.
Well, I was puzzled by what happens to grandmother. Is that something where I just check the fuck out, or does grandmother
she
just?
She goes away for the night. She goes away for the night. She says she'll be back in the morning. I've read a couple of. This is so bizarre, but a couple of more than one article I've read about this movie says that these guys are hanging out there for multiple days, which is not possible. This is one night, but they meet her. She's wearing an interesting visor. Which I want to know more about. I kind of want one for myself, frankly. And she says that, and all the guests are uncharacteristically rude to her for some reason. And she disappears and says she'll be back in the morning. And they leave the next morning. So grandmother is just like a non-entity in this movie, for all intents and purposes.
Maybe everything happens just because people were so fucking rude to grandma.
I thought about that. I was like, because there is the grandson does make a big to-do about how rude everyone is to her, and I thought like, maybe that's like the inciting incident for the curse. But we know it's probably just the bones. I think grandmother is just, I don't know. I feel like it might be very personal. That's why I also felt, another reason I felt like this was a student film. I felt like whoever made this movie was like, yeah, my grandmother's got a farm. We can shoot there for a weekend. But she needs to be in the movie.
What should we call it?
She'll let us film there if she can appear for 30 seconds.
That is the role that would be given to like Robert Englund or Lance Henriksen and then American horror movie.
Or Tony Todd.
Straight to video. Yeah, Tony.
Barbara Crampton.
Yeah.
So another question I have is there's this literally one shot where we have this kind of like stagger zoom towards a woman who is walking across the field towards grandmother's farm. She's in very distinctive, very colorful garb. It's like yellow and pink and white. Do you guys remember this?
No.
Yes.
and that was when Steven fell asleep.
I didn't fall asleep. I watched this in one sitting, I'll have you know.
You just told us you fell asleep.
No, I said it was lulling me to sleep. I didn't fall asleep. I powered through this motherfucker and immediately started watching the sequel as soon as it finished.
What? Okay, that's the biggest spoiler of the spoiler room, is that you watched Grandmother's Farm 2.
I watched like 15 minutes of it. I mean,
oh my
Grandmother's Farm 2 looked like a fucking Scorsese movie compared to this shit.
Really? Oh, they took a step up. It looked like
shit, but I mean, in comparison, it was like better camera. Begins with a sweeping drone shot of dunes.
Is it the same characters?
Same cast.
Oh, I love a sequel that preserves the cast and continuity of the first film. I feel like it's rare in horror.
But it had, I turned it off because it had the same fucking sleepy ass hangout vibe. There's like
so they were still just chilling.
There's like a 5-minute soccer scene in the desert. Apropos of nothing.
This feels like a film where it's like they shot the first and the second one at the same time.
It's not the case.
Well, except they didn't. No. They needed the money from the first one to make the second one.
Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, maybe I'll finish the second one. Maybe the director fulfilled his vision finally with that. I don't know. But, I mean, I will say...
Oh, he wants to make a third. He wants to make a third. We know that.
I read that, too.
Yeah.
And I will say, like, given that Grandmother's Farm, the original, the OG, is so shapeless, it felt to me like it was the first act of a movie. Like, it doesn't get interesting until the end, and then it just ends. So it seemed to me like a trilogy was planned from the beginning, except that's not how you do a trilogy. Each film should stand on its own. And
So let me ask you this: did anything even like remotely scary happen
absolutely
in the 15
not.
minutes you
Absolutely
watched? Oh,
not.
okay,
Not
wow.
even remotely.
Okay, so same vibe.
Yeah.
And how long is it? That's another important
it is 10
question.
minutes longer. So
Oh,
still
okay.
under 90 minutes.
Amazing. All right, but to get back to my question, so we see this woman that Steven did not see, but Chris did. So maybe Chris can help me with this. And as far as I remember, we do not see a woman wearing that garb in any other scene in the movie. Do you have any insight on who that was, what was happening?
Oh, we see
Anything.
at the end of the movie, we finally like really see like I guess the djinn. It's one of the girls from the convenience store, and she is demonic and very scary indeed. And that is she's wearing the same dress.
Oh,
So,
she is
yeah.
in that shot.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
I didn't
that
remember
is one of the girls from the convenience store as a djinn. I guess.
Who has been wearing completely black
Yeah.
clothing up until that point.
Okay.
Right.
Interesting.
But yeah,
Okay.
because that's weird.
I
'cause-
forgot
Is
that
it
she
though,
was wearing
Patrick?
that in that
Is it
scene.
though? Is it interesting?
It is interesting. I am interested.
Well, it's the thing where it's like we see this, it's and this movie is like 2/3 over by this point, and you're like, okay, we got a clearly objectively spooky being coming to grandmother's farm. Now we're gonna see some shit, and you don't see some shit. You don't even really see that girl again until the end of the movie, where she's like curled up in a ball going bah, and the housekeeper is like, oh God, no, and that's it.
Yeah, fucking
The
like,
poor housekeeper.
dude.
Ugh.
Yeah, he's the Dobby, not the Dobby, but the Dobby of the movie. Like he's just the house elf who is constantly like being servile to everyone,
Yeah.
and I felt
Oh, the
bad for
grandson
that,
treats
dude.
him fucking horribly.
Oh yeah, he's like, oh master.
But the grandson kind of gets it when,
waving at everybody.
When Dobby, like, he's like, so the grandson is like so like concerned about this late night lamb roast, and he's like fucking grilling Dobby about it. And Dobby fucking shows him what's up, and he's like, "This is an automated process. We do this all the time. You need to chill the fuck out." I love that.
Oh,
I love that moment.
I was hypnotized by the automatic, like, mechanized spit for the lamb. Like, they just put it on this thing, and there's a little motor that just, like, slowly and consistently turns the lamb. I was like, oh, whenever I finally manage to buy a house in this horror show of a market, that's the first thing I'm getting for my backyard is one of those spits to go over the fire pit.
That is the horror that we're all experiencing right now. That the housing market right now, if you don't own a home, you're trying to get a home, you're fucked right now. And I can't wait to get a wave of horror movies about that concept.
Oh God, that sounds so.
Maybe
tedious and-
the next Spiral
Ooh.
from the Book of Saw, Spiral 2, will be like
The next great real estate thriller.
Tell me
Chris
about
Rock.
escrow, baby.
I'm a write it.
Chris Rock will be saying with the cadence of Adam West's Batman, he'll be like, Spiral, housing spiral.
Yes.
Anyway.
Absolutely.
But yeah, guys, I mean, all right. Oh, so I did allude to one thing that I thought had an interesting idea, and it's one of the things where like you watch a movie and it's you're just clawing at the ground trying to find something to like about a movie, and there was something that I was like, that's kind of a cool concept, or it could be in a movie that I'm making up in my own head, and it's when the holy character. He's kind of the first to catch on that there's an evil presence in this house, and so he's like, all right, I gotta cleanse this house. And so he goes up to his buddy and he's like, you got any gum arabic in this house? And he's like, I think there's something in the kitchen. And he goes and he's and then I don't know if he actually had like a tool of the like a religious person's cleansing urn with him, or if this is all just cobbled together. But for a moment he looks like he's MacGyvering this solution, and I like the idea of an exorcist who didn't bring his satchel with him, and he has to cleanse a house or cleanse spirits and do ceremonies with found objects and things like that.
I could have done with a lot more of that, frankly.
Yeah, that was the
That's a
one
great
thing I did
concept.
like.
Dude, you know what these guys needed was Farakuja.
Or Jay.
Definitely Jay.
No, Farakuja.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, Jay. No, you're right.
Farak Huja is a hero. He's Jay adjacent.
But he specializes in gin, though.
Yeah.
Jason?
He is Jay adjacent.
Oh, Jay
adjacent. Yeah. Oh. Yeah, he does specialize in gin. He's the guy where if you brought Jay on here, Jay would be like, I can help, but I don't know a whole lot about gin, so I'm going to call a guy. He knows everything there is to know. Just stay right here. He's like Pawn Stars.
I feel like Jay would be like, I don't think you guys have all that much to worry about here. This seems like a pretty low-key threat. Bye-bye.
Dude.
Jay has seen some shit. He'd be like, all right, call me back when there's a lemon rolling around your basement.
Dude, you know what's upsetting? Here's my, you guys talk about physical media all the time. I don't really care one way or the other. Here's my physical media gripe of the week is recently I was like, you know what I need to own on Blu-ray? 1920 London Fear Strikes Again.
Why?
It doesn't... Because I love that movie. It has been a part of my life now for nearly 4 fucking years. And I looked it up on eBay. Blu-ray does not exist. You can get a DVD, but for $45.
Oh my God.
I'm not going to be a fucking animal and get this on DVD for $45. So if anybody...
No, hold on. What if I told you, Patrick...
Oh, boy.
What if I told you?
Oh, boy.
And we're going to have to censor this because it's illegal activity.
I'll add lots of bleeps. Don't worry. Just say
we'll bleep it. But what if I told you that I 1920 London off of and I have a high definition on my and I was planning to put it onto I've just been lazy as fuck.
Dude!
Don't worry.
Wait, you can do that? How do you do that?
I have ways. I did it. So don't worry.
I want it.
We'll be watching. We'll be watching 1920 London soon.
Yeah, give me that.
Oh yeah,
give it to me.
You got it. Can't wait. All right.
Yes.
Yeah. What else is there, guys? I think that's about
There's
it.
nothing. We're done. I don't want to think about this movie anymore. I want to just erase it from my mind.
But you know what? God bless Ahmad Zayn. He seems like a great guy. I'm glad that he got to make this and that it turned out so well.
Oh, I'm happy for his success. Sure. And people in the UAE seem to love this movie, this franchise, and good for them as well. They respond to it.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to stop them with my screw it.
I say this unironically. Nothing would make me happier than if Ahmed Zayn got a gig directing a Marvel movie.
I knew you were going to say that.
I actually thought you were going for Conjuring movie.
Oh no! I say this as someone who doesn't hold the Marvel Cinematic Universe in that high of a I don't have it's not very sacred to me. So nothing would make me happier than kids flocking to see whatever the hell Iron Man 5 and it's directed by Ahmed Zayn.
Sure.
I hope he gets a big break.
All right, so Chris, you get to pick the movie for next week. You get to decide what hellscape we inhabit on our next episode. What are we watching?
We are watching The Wind. It's not the Warren Zevon album. I wish it were.
I've wanted to see this. I'm excited. It's a horror western, right?
I don't know what it is. It just kind of caught my eye browsing. It looks a little artsy. It looks well done. Reminds me of some of the period pieces we've seen before, like the Golem. It says, isolated on a wind-ravaged 19th century homestead, a frontierswoman begins to suspect that evil lurks in the terrifying emptiness all around her. So I'm hoping for a slow burn.
I've heard good things, and I will say it's been in my queue for quite some time.
I'm into it. I'm curious.
Cool. All right, we're going to watch The Wind next time. But until then, like I said, follow us on social media at EHMONcast, EHMONcast. Chime in, talk about movies. Tell us what you would like us to watch. Tell us what you thought about the movies we already watched. In 2 weeks, we'll be watching The Wind. And until then, for every horror movie on Netflix, I'm Chris.
I'm Patrick.
I'm Steven.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye-bye.